Good afternoon and welcome to the third Smart Grid Educational Series webinar live from UCLA today in Westwood, California, home of the SMERC program, the Smart Energy Research Center here at UCLA. I'm here visiting from Professor Rajiv Gad's office. I am helping this program as an industry advisor, and I have invited him to come and speak next month on this program and the valuable research that they're doing for the industry, as well as educating a new generation of people on smart grid technologies. So I'm very happy to be here and to share this forum with Rajiv Gad and his team. Today, we are going to have presentations from the NIST, that is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. We'll have Jeff Mazer and Marianne Swanson, who will be presenting an overview on the Smart Grid program and the specific working groups and some of their activities. And then it'll be followed by a presentation on the Smart Grid trade submissions that the Department of Commerce is facilitating, and Shannon Fraser is going to give you a status on that for the missions to various countries. So this educational series that I started in January is essentially a free public service to our country as well as internationally. And the main purpose of that is that quite often we find people with great ideas, but they may not have the funding to go to a conference and pay the dues and then present over there. So without having to travel, they can come on this forum and share their ideas as well as learn from industry experts. And so that is the main purpose for this webinar series. And going forward, I'm going to encourage all of you to contribute either with your ideas during the Q&A, or if you would like to present on some work that you're doing in some aspect of this industry, I would welcome your presentations. This is a forum for all of you, and it should be as participatory as possible. So with that, what I'd like to do now is move to the next presentation, which is an overview of the Evolving Smart Grid, the NIST Smart Grid Interoperability Program, and the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel. And we have with us Jeff Mazer from NIST, who has recently moved into the Smart Grid activities. And so I'm going to move the presenter ball, Jeff Mazer, and I would like to welcome him to start this presentation. Jeff?
Yes. Can you hear me, Erfan?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Mazer. I'm in the Smart Grid program here at National Institute of Standards and Technology. And for the next half hour, I'd like to give you a quick overview of the Smart Grid and the NIST program in Smart Grid, and in particular, the Interoperability Panel, which was created by NIST. So here's the outline of my talk. Getting right into things, let me give you a quick overview of the Smart Grid to bring everybody up to speed. The present electric grid, being so widespread and having so much equipment, is arguably the greatest engineering achievement, the largest engineering achievement of the 20th century, well over $1 trillion in capital equipment deployed in the United States. And the evolving grid, which will be a marriage of cyber and physical electronic technologies, will be an equally impressive development. So exactly what is the Smart Grid? Basically, the Smart Grid, while there are a number of different definitions, what they all seem to have in common is that the Smart Grid will be some type of marriage of cyber and electrical, electronic, physical technologies for the purpose of improving efficiency and reliability of the power grid, all in a secure environment, and hopefully, no doubt, to improve cost effectiveness and the overall robustness of the system. Much of the system, as you know, is quite old, many years old. The smart grid will allow integration of will have certain interesting properties. In particular, it will allow integration of large amounts of renewables, for example, in particular, photovoltaics and wind. And it will also accommodate eventually electric vehicles as a form of storage. So electric vehicles will be both a load on the grid and storage for the grid. My next slide is a fast look at U.S. national policy. The U.S. government's effort in smart grid really started in 2007 with the Energy Independence and Security Act, EISA, and it charges various agencies of the government, including the White House and NIST, to tackle certain specific aspects of the evolving smart grid. The government charter for smart grid is totally defined by EISA. NIST in particular is charged with facilitating development of interoperability standards. So here we have 10 national policies that are promulgated by the EISA of 2007, and it really dwells on the application of digital technology for enhanced reliability, efficiency, security, overall optimization, and integration of widespread renewables. So this addresses a new paradigm of secure, reliable, interactive grid technology. The present grid is optimized for one-way flow of power as opposed to a network of small distributed intermittent generators, for example, widespread rooftop-mounted PV. And here are the other 5 aspects of the other 10 national priorities for the smart grid. I've mentioned several times the integration of renewables because this is something which is not accommodated very well by the present grid, particularly when more power is being uploaded rather than downloaded into the grid. The overall topology of the grid as it exists now is not really oriented to that type of paradigm. This slide is a little schematic of today's power grid. It's really based on central station as opposed to distributed generators. The generation is almost entirely done by large synchronous machines. These machines are usually characterized by high current and relatively low voltage. So consequently, in order to minimize transmission drops, which can be very considerable with high current, one needs to use transformers to create large voltage and relatively low current. This is done in the form of three-phase power so as to enable large induction motors, which are the workhorses of industry, to receive uniform power. Individual phases are taken off the grid for distribution to individual residences and the small motors and small loads that they entertain. PV and wind are intermittent, and PV in particular, photovoltaics, when I say PV I should define that, photovoltaics, solar cells, is a DC generator. So widespread photovoltaics needs inversion into alternating current and synchronization to the grid, and this implies the generation of harmonics. So that's an additional problem that smart grid electronics will have to deal with. Notice the last bullet here, lack of customer, relating to today's grid, lack of customer side data to manage and reduce energy use. One of the characteristics of the evolving smart grid will be that there will be quite a bit of both producer and customer side awareness of the grid. And studies, this is very significant, I think, because aside from the fact that it will allow producers to have greater control over the grid for enhanced reliability and greater awareness of the grid, studies also show that consumers tend to conserve energy when they have more awareness and control. So there's an advantage from both the producer standpoint and the consumer standpoint. My next slide just gives you some facts about the present electricity grid in the United States. Unlike Korea, which has one company, and China, which has only 2 generating companies, in the United States there are 3,200 electric utility companies, tremendous number of power plants, huge amount of capital resources. And over a period of years, this huge infrastructure is going to morph into the smart grid. And that process has already started. This slide shows that the smart grid is more than just an upgrade of the present grid. It is, as I said before, a marriage of cyber and various electrical and physical electronic technologies to enhance awareness, reliability, efficiency, controllability, and very importantly, security of the grid. So here are some ways we think the smart grid is going to evolve over a number of years. First of all, the numbers at the top, the 25 to 35%, this includes hydro. Probably by the year 2020, photovoltaics and wind will constitute about 10% of the power. And on the second, in the second bullet, notice I mentioned microgrids. Microgrids are becoming increasingly common. Microgrids are defined several ways, but the definition that we like to use is that a microgrid is technically a subset of a grid, which has the attribute of being able to become autonomous and being able to disconnect from the grid. So, for example, suppose you had a photovoltaic array. It can be disconnected from the grid, as indeed it must be, so as to avoid various safety hazards in the event that grid lines go down and technicians need to go out and work on the grid. So it has to be disconnectable, and if there's battery backup associated with that photovoltaic array, it could also maintain autonomy. So autonomy and disconnectability are fundamental characteristics of microgrids, and in particular disconnectability. In the third bullet, I point out net metering. Net metering refers to exactly what it says, a meter which records the algebraic sum of the input and output power. This is mandated by various states now as part of their renewable energy portfolio. Going down to electric vehicles, there will be a growing use of plug-in electric vehicles. That's years away before there's a huge amount of electric vehicles, but for sure that's the trend of the future. And electric vehicles will serve as both a load and as a generator in the form of storage of power which can be drawn on during peak hours of the day. And finally, I point out that a very important part of the smart grid will be self-powered and wireless sensors all over the grid. For example, right now in many parts of the country, the local power company doesn't know if power has gone down until customers call in and report that their neighborhood has lost power. In the evolving smart grid, sensors all over the grid will immediately inform the power company of this and perhaps allow them to route power around that fault to continue service to their customers. So self-powered and wireless sensors will be a very important part of the evolving smart grid. Here I point out some drivers and goals. In particular, at the bottom, I point out enhanced reliability and security. This seems to be on everybody's mind. With an aging grid, reliability has gone down, and that seems to be on everybody's mind. But of course, since this will be highly interactive grid, cybersecurity will be most important. Also, in this slide, I show that increased efficiency is a key priority. A smart grid helps utilities reduce delivery losses, and it also helps customers reduce peak power draws. Some things to point out here. Hydro probably won't grow very much. A lot of hydro capacity has already been maxed out. But photovoltaics is growing at about 40% per year. And in 2011, the worldwide additional deployment was about 30 gigawatts. So photovoltaics is just exploding. There's also a lot of wind. In fact, there's more wind deployed around the world than photovoltaics. Distributed storage will smooth out peak central station demand, and that will come from battery storage of renewable energy, but also eventually battery storage provided by electric vehicles. And this smoothing out of peak demand will obviate expensive peaking power plants. An interesting thing to note with some renewables, for example, photovoltaic power, is that it tends to follow air conditioning loads during the summer, and thus distributed PV, just in that form, will help to relieve peak load problems. So efficiency is a big thing in the smart grid, as is reliability. For certain industries, and for example, the semiconductor industry, a loss of electric power can just be catastrophic, for example, in crystal growing operations. So certain industries are particularly affected by power failures. And industries as well as individual residences are clamoring for improved reliability from the grid. In my next slide, I talk a little bit more about renewables in the smart grid context. One thing here, I think PMJ is a typo. I think it should be, instead of PJM, I think it should be PMJ, which stands for Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey Interconnect. The PMJ interconnection operated in the eastern United States is, at least according to Wikipedia, the world's largest wholesale competitive electric market. And this is a graph showing their total load versus wind power, August 26, 2009, as an example. And you can see what jumps out at you here is that load and power from alternate sources, in this case wind, don't necessarily follow each other. So storage must be an important part of the incorporation of widespread renewables. Not just because of intermittency, but also because their fundamental curves just don't coincide with each other. Smart grid will also have a big effect on the country's dependence on petroleum. Actually, very little central station power is generated by petroleum. However, by transitioning to electric vehicles and by using the batteries in those electric vehicles for midday storage and relieving peaking demand, and by using central station power to provide the fundamental energy for electric vehicles as opposed to petroleum, we can considerably lower the country's dependence on the petroleum paradigm. Now, with that quick introduction to what the smart grid is and what the motivation for the smart grid is, let me go to the role of government. I have a few slides here on the role of government. As I pointed out here, the role of government goes from the state level and even the municipal level. There are 1 or 2 cities now that have feed-in tariffs for renewables. all the way up to the federal government. The lead agency in the federal government effort is the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy has, at the Department of Energy is the Federal Smart Grid Task Force Coordinator, Eric Leitner. He's with Department of Energy, and DOE has already invested billions of dollars, mostly through ARRA, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, into smart grid programs. These include deployment of smart meters, net meters, wireless meters, also thermostats, and the deployment of various equipment, particularly in demonstration projects for utilities. Where NIST comes in, NIST coordinates and accelerates development of standards by private sector SDOs, that's Standards Development Organizations. NIST does not have regulatory authority. A lot of people seem to think that NIST does, but it does not have any regulatory authority. However, FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, does have regulatory authority, and of course so do the PUCs by the various states. And this graph this chart and visual shows some of the things that Department of Energy has done. They've, particularly through ARRA money, they have underwritten investment in millions of smart meters and various capital equipment by utility companies. In the chart here, AMI stands for Advanced Metering Infrastructure. Okay. So now, let me go on to the specific role of NIST. The role of NIST is all about interoperability. NIST works with standards bodies to facilitate harmonization and development of standards. The NIST Smart Grid program is very active with standard development organizations, and it serves the role of coordinating the development of standards. It does not actually write standards or regulate standards, but it under the 2007 EISA, it coordinates and facilitates the development of standards by the private sector, SDO, Standard Development Organizations. And NIST is also working with foreign organizations to ensure the harmonization of standards. It's very important from an equipment manufacturer standpoint that equipment not be released before standards are harmonized with other countries so that the equipment can be sold abroad and easily adapted to equipment abroad. The NIST program, which started in the NIST Smart Grid program, which started in 2009, has 3 phases. Right now, we're in phase 2 and 3. The big result from phase 1 was the release of the NIST Interoperability Framework document, version 1.0. We now have a version 2.0 that I'll talk about in just a moment. We're in phases 2 and 3 now, and 2 and 3 are particularly oriented around the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, the SGIP, which is a public-private organization that NIST founded and strongly supports. During the next year, this will transition to a private-public organization. That is, it will be privatized. However, NIST will maintain a strong input into the SGIP. And in phase 3, which we're moving into, we also deal with a conformity framework to cover testing and certification. This slide talks a little bit about the release 2.0. That was released end of February. It identifies 75 key standards that have been agreed upon and or are in the process of development by various high-profile private organizations, for example, IEEE, ANSI, Institute of Electrotechnical Commission, and so on. The roadmap points out or defines activities that are included in the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel. In particular, we have 18 priority action plan teams and also several DEWGs, that stands for Domain Expert Working Groups. For example, the Vehicle to Grid Domain Expert Working Group. You can find details of this online by going to the website in the upper right-hand corner, nist.gov/smartgrid. Notice the conceptual model that we have here. This is a little graphic that shows how Smart Grid ties together various functions of the grid as well as various participants in the grid. This slide points out the highlights of the NIST Smart Grid effort. It all started with the 2007 EISA that gives responsibility for the coordination, facilitation of development of Smart Grid interoperability standards. The great achievement so far, there have been a number of achievements, but probably the most significant achievement so far has been the founding and development and growth of the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, which I'm going to talk about more in just a moment. This is certainly the centerpiece of our efforts so far. So let's talk more about the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, the SGIP. Here's the vision that we have for it. As I said, it's a public-private partnership supported by NIST under the auspices of EISA. It's an open organization. Membership is open to interested stakeholder organizations, including foreign organizations. It was specifically created by NIST to support its Smart Grid Charter. One way that it has transparency and openness is that its quarterly meetings are open to the public. Our next meeting is on 19 to 22 March in Charlotte at the Omni Hotel. All of the meetings there and presentations are open to the public. We try to be as transparent as we can be. The standards are done, as I said, by the privates. The actual writing of standards is done by the private sector, for example, IEC and IEEE. The SGIP does not write standards, nor does NIST. We want that to be done by the private sector, and we facilitate that effort. Here's a little breakdown of the SGIP in our vision. We have overall, and I'll show you a graphic of this in just a few slides, we have a governing board and working groups and priority action plans. The priority action plans concentrate on specific technical problems. For example, Priority Action Plan 13, PAP 13, addresses harmonization of an IEEE and IEC standards for time synchronization, which time synchronization is very important in synchrophaser measurement and subsequent characterization and control of the grid. This harmonization of standards between these two organizations, IEEE and IEC, is covered by, is addressed by PAP 13. The PAPs expire when the problem is solved. So when this problem is solved, PAP 13 will be disbanded. On the other hand, the domain expert working groups, notice that's under the third bullet under working groups. The domain expert working groups are permanent efforts within the SGIP, and they deal with more general problems. For example, there's a domain expert working group, as I said, that deals with vehicle-to-grid technology and standards. This slide talks a little bit about two important standing committees within the SGIP, the Architecture Committee and the Certification Committee. You can read more about this on our Smart Grid website. Here's a list of Priority Action Plan, PAP, groups. I pointed out to you on the right-hand side in blue the harmonization of IEEE and IEC standards for time synchronization for synchrophasor measurement as an example. And this graphic shows the, am I on the right graphic? Indeed I am. This graphic shows a visual breakdown of how the SGIP is organized, the governing board, and the various PAPs and DEWGs. And you'll notice on the left some standing committees and working groups. Marianne is going to talk with you about the Cybersecurity Working Group in just a moment. Here's a breakdown of our membership. The membership has grown quite a bit since 2009 when the SGIP was formed. We started off with only a few hundred members, but in early January of this year we have over 744 organizations who are pushing 2,000 individual members. Notice that membership is open to foreign organizations. The U.S. members are by far the largest group, but there are individuals and organizations from a variety of countries, and this is important, we feel, because an important task of the SGIP is the harmonization of standards with other countries. Here you see an SGIP membership breakout. There are a lot of acronyms down on the horizontal axis, but what this essentially indicates is that essentially all participants in the grid and all major organizations that would be associated with the development of standards for the grid are represented in the SGIP. As I said, we encourage international smart grid coordination. We have bilateral discussions with a number of countries in Europe and in Asia. And all of this is intended to be open and transparent. You can read more about this on our website. I point out in this slide that where do standards really come from? Standards come from the private sector, and in particular from long drawn-out efforts by various very prominent organizations, for example, the IEEE and the IEC and ANSI, quite a number of organizations. And how can you participate in this process? We encourage participation. There are various ways. You can show up at our open quarterly meetings. You can then participate in the priority action plans, in the domain expert working groups, in various other working groups, and on committees. And for more information, you can look at these websites. I've already pointed out the www.nist.gov Smart Grid site. The Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, SGIP, also has its own website, and there's also a Twiki. You can follow the activities of the SGIP on our Twiki. And so with that, I conclude my presentation on the NIST Smart Grid Interoperability effort and the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, and hand it over to Marianne Swanson, who will talk with you specifically about the Cybersecurity Working Group. Marianne?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And before we ask Marianne to come on and present, let me just thank you, Jeff, for giving us a very good overview of what the purpose of the NIST Smart Grid program is and what are some of the activities that the NIST is doing. This was very, very valuable, so thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
before I ask Marianne to speak, I would like to say that I have really enjoyed working with Marianne when I was leading the NESCOR project from EPRI. And we've had several opportunities to talk both in person as well as in conference calls. And those dialogues led to a very good collaborative effort in looking at the vulnerabilities of the Smart Energy Profile 1.0, which was done jointly between the NIST Cybersecurity Working Group and the NESCOR project in Group 1, looking at the failure scenarios and identifying what are some of the requirements for deploying Smart Energy Profile 1.0 in a secure manner. So I really appreciate the leadership that Marianne has shown in the Cybersecurity Working Group over the last couple of years, as she has led this group with the various working groups. And now I'm going to move this presenter ball over to Marianne. And Marianne, the floor is yours.
Okay, so now I have the little presenter ball. How cool! So thank you for the nice introduction, Erfan. That was very, very nice. And I too have enjoyed working with you. It's been a pleasure, and continue now. I think what you're doing here is great. So they're very valuable, and I appreciate the opportunity to present here. So let's talk about the Cybersecurity Working Group. Now, I looked at the view, all the attendees, just to see who was out there, and I see that there's a lot of my CSWG members are out there. So some of this is going to sound very familiar to you guys, and then there are a lot of names that I didn't know. So hopefully you'll hear about what we're doing. You'll get some interest, and I would encourage you, if you hear about a subgroup that is right up your alley, or you're wanting to get involved in this area, then by all means, please consider joining, because we're always looking for people to participate. So the Cybersecurity Working Group, it's been around a while now. Back since 2009, we were established, and Annabelle Lee, who is now at EPRI, was the leader of that group. And so I took over about a year and a half ago, and have been marching forward ever since. So we're a group quite large. We have about 800 participants. We are a public-private sector group. We've got people ranging, we have vendors, we've got service providers, we've got the academia, we've got regulatory organizations, we're international. We've got every kind of person out there practically. Now, I say we have 800 participants, but when I get on those calls, I'm seeing that we actually really probably have closer to about, 35 that are really doing the work. So by all means, we would like to have more activity. And I think the more we get people involved, the better the product ultimately is coming out of our organization. You get a much larger sample size, you get a more diverse group, and consequently, then you get a better product. So I definitely encourage people to participate. So the working group, as I said, has been around for about 2.5 years now. So let's go to the next slide. So I don't have to do this alone as far as management goes. I've got 3 vice chairs, and as you can see from the list up there, they're diverse. We've got another federal agency, Matthew Light from DOE. We've got John Lim from New York Consolidated Edison, so we've got a utility representation. And then we have Dave Dalva, who used to be with Cisco, but is no longer. We've got our a secretary that is instrumental in getting these minutes out, which I believe just got out a couple hours ago, Mark Enstrom. And then I have support staff. I've got Tanya Brewer here at NIST and Victoria Pilateri from Booz Allen. And then some of you may know, Sandy Basic is no longer with Internex. Her last day was Friday. So we no longer have immediate technical Internex support for the CSWG, which we're still reeling. We have been using Sandy. She's been instrumental, and so we're kind of trying to backfill now. And you'll see from some of my slides where I still had not removed her from all the different things that she's been involved in. So I'm not having to do all of this alone. Now, one of the things that we did put out and are probably the most famous for is back when I first came in as the lead of the group of CSWG, we put out the NIST Interagency Report 7628. Now, this guide is a guide. It's not mandated, and it's a tool. You should be using it. Organizations should be using this guide to look at the high-level security requirements that are in Volume 1, see if their organization can develop a cybersecurity program that would be consistent with these high-level security requirements. In Volume 2, we actually have a whole volume dedicated to privacy and privacy recommendations and best practices. And then we have on Volume 3 research that we had conducted in the CSWG, where we see future research could be completed. We've got cryptographic issues and suggestions all in this Volume 3. So it is a nice, large, I should say, document. What we also have is a 20-page summary document that you could download off the NIST website. So if you guys are familiar with the NIST site, you can obtain it. You can also obtain it from this, the Twiki, the CSWG Twiki site. But anyway, this document has a 20-page summary that describes the various volumes, what are in each volume, so the chapters in each volume. So you could actually target, if you're really only looking for privacy, then you do not have to download all 3 volumes of the document. You could just target in and download Volume 2. If you're looking at architecture, you could go in and go to Volume 1 and take down, just download Volume 1, and in that there would be the conceptual architecture diagrams that we have with the interfaces, how they map to the high-level requirements. All of this is very useful as you start to design your own cybersecurity program within your own utility or your own organization. So as I said, this is not mandatory, this guide. It is a guide. And it does not prescribe particular specific solutions. It's high level. And then I'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to be doing in certain areas like AMI, where we're going to go down to a much more detailed level. We are going to be updating this guide. So in April 25th and 26th, we're holding a CSWG face-to-face meeting in Sterling, Virginia. And in that meeting, what we're going to do, or workshop, is start working on where we would like to see updates to the NIST IR. So we've got various groups out there, like the high-level security requirements group, where this would be the perfect time for them to go through, look at the high-level security requirements, and start to decide how we would want to update those high-level requirements. And I'll talk to more about that in a minute. But we have our idea is to have a first draft of the updated NIST IR. Now, it won't be totally redone. It's going to be updated by the beginning of the fall. So that's sort of the plan for that. And when I say at the beginning of the fall, I mean a draft would be coming out at the beginning of fall, not the final. So I have the management team, and I also have subgroups. We would not be able to do anything in an 800 group lump. We need to have divided up the activities. And so we have divided up the various projects into 8 groups, or 7 groups, sorry. We've got the AMI security subgroup, and I'll talk about them a little bit more in a minute and what they're doing. We have the architecture group. Now, Sandy is no longer, as I mentioned, with us in the CSWG, and so Elizabeth Sisley has volunteered to fill Sandy's shoes and has now, and thank goodness, is now going to be leading the group in the architecture subgroup. And in the architecture subgroup, they're working on a logical reference architecture, fleshing it out, coming up with mapping the security roles and the actors to these interfaces, and then ensuring that we're aligned with the SGIP architecture subgroup. So they're off going and enhancing the architecture. And so we have to ensure as they go off and update that we stay true to what they're doing and continue with the security piece that we're sort of laying on top of their architecture. So it's a moving target, and hopefully we'll stabilize soon, because what we want to do is once it is stabilized, that information will get updated in the NIST IR as well. So if this is an area you're interested in, it's the architecture subgroup, and Elizabeth Sisley is the lead. We also have the design principles group that Daniel Thanos and Annabelle Lee are running. And that group, what they've been working on, and actually they're going to hopefully continue, finish it. We need to finish this, is a PKI, an outline on smart grid key management systems for AMI. So this is desperately needed, and I think at this stage an outline is really about where we are and what we can do at this point, and we'll see if we can't flesh it out. Probably it could be a good year, 2-year project. Key management for AMI is a huge endeavor. Also, they're drafting a section on micro PKIs for the key management system for AMI. So again, PKI is maybe one solution, and then you've got your key management piece as well. So the design principles group, or the DPG as we call them, is up and could definitely continue and keep going in that area. We have the high-level requirements group. Now this group's been on hiatus, but as we start to work on the NIST IR, this is where they will be coming back together. So one of the things that happens when we're reviewing standards, and so I'll be talking about this in a second, but one of the main things we do in the CSWG is we have a subgroup that's called the standards subgroup. And they are responsible for reviewing the requirements, standards that are getting worked on in those priority action plan teams that Jeff had mentioned earlier. And so what we want to do is ensure that security is getting baked into these requirements and to these standards and not, bolted on after the fact. So we've got 18 priority action plan teams, and we are always looking and reviewing these requirements, these standards, to ensure that security is in there. So one of the things that we find is when we're reviewing these standards, we are reviewing them against the NIST IR high-level security requirements. Those are the ones in Volume 1 of the NIST IR. And what we find sometimes as we're going through and mapping these requirements that are in these standards to the security requirements, we find that the security requirement may be lacking in a certain area, or it's kind of missed the mark and it should really include something else, or we find there's redundancy, all kinds of various things, or we've completely, it should be in there and we don't have anything. So we've been tracking these and noting these, and so now as we're starting to consider updating the NIST IR, these kinds of things we found needs to get put into this update. So we'll be doing that with this high-level requirements group in the very near future. Dave Dalva and Vicki Piloteri are the two co-chairs or subgroup leads for this group. We also have the privacy group. Now, privacy is what we're finding in the smart grid is a big enabler and or could be a big challenge. And so this group is quite active. We've got a lot of members. They've got subgroups within, and they have stayed very active. And I'll talk a little bit more about their work in a few minutes. We also have the security testing and certification group that Nelson Hastings from NIST runs. And actually, the privacy group is run by Rebecca Harold. I forgot to mention that. And then, and I'll talk about the security testing and certification group too in a second. The standards group, which Francis Cleveland runs, as I mentioned, has been super busy. In fact, the work never ceases. We are currently reviewing NASB Rec 22. And then we'll have to go into some of the work that PAP 15 has been working on, our Priority Action Plan 15. We've got an IEEE and an ITUT standard that we're going to review. Those are sort of the next ones in our queue. Something we do when we're reviewing these standards is we want to get the experts that are involved in the standard to help us. Or what benefits both sides of the party is to get somebody that's going to be building a system, that's going to be implementing this standard, and would love to know about the security requirements, the security pitfalls, where they need to augment security, and assist us in this review, because they're actually looking at this document or this standard with an implementation eye, and that's critical for a good, solid review. So we're always looking for help in that. And we list on the Twiki under the standards subgroup which ones are in the queue. And so if this is one that's coming up and this is something you're going to be doing in your own work, by all means participate. You'll have firsthand knowledge of how to secure the standard, what you need to know about the standard, as well as work with us and assist us in giving it a real-world flair. So can't encourage that enough. So some of the things that we've been doing, as I mentioned before, the Priority Action Plan collaboration is key. So we not only are reviewing the standards at the end, as they're working them and at the end, but we are also have liaisons for each one of these teams to ensure that we're out there reminding them that, hey, don't forget about security, what about authentication, you forgot about logging, all those kinds of things that tend to go by the wayside, and we're making sure that they remember that these need to get included. Something else that we've been very busy doing is outreach. So over the last year and a half, we had gone and visited 8 states, 4 public utility commissions. We've briefed over 1,000 participants. We have a one-page brochure that describes what we do. So if you want to get involved, your management is wondering, why should you? Well, we have this little one-pager that you could download. It's on the NIST IR that describes what we do in the various groups. We also have just put out a privacy briefing for utilities and the Public Utility Commission. So we have 2 different briefings. And what these are is to train the trainer. So you're out there in a utility and you want your people to understand the issues related to privacy that could be encountered within a utility organization, or you're a Public Utility Commission and you want your staff to understand what they need to be thinking about from a privacy perspective. Then these slides can, you would be tweaking them. They have numerous notes on them, and then you would insert, or tailor them to your organization. But primarily, it's all the different things you would need to be thinking about in the various types of stakeholder communities, such as the utilities or the PUCs. We've also are working on a high-level requirements assessment guide. So this one is coming out probably within, I would say by the end of next month. It's gone slower than we thought. We had received quite a few comments on the draft, and so now we are updating or reviewing the comments and making changes, and should be putting it back out as a final. And this document will be an SGIP guide, not a NIST document. So it's an SGIP document, and it will be out, I would say, by the end of, April at the latest. That's probably really pushing it. But look for it, because this one is about how to assess your organization's compliance, if you want to use, I hate to use that word, but compliance to the requirements that are in the NIST IR. And it'll tell you how you can go about doing that. So you might want to review, an audit log for these types of things. You may want to run a password checker to ensure passwords are strong. All those kinds of technical, operational, and management type of assessment criteria that you would conduct. So look for that. It'll be a good one. We've also collaborated with DOE and NERC to develop, and you may have heard of this one because it's actually right out now for a final review and comment, a electricity sector energy enterprise-wide risk management process guide. So this document took a NIST publication, 839, and 839 it's been out for about a year now, and it's a guide on a managing information security risk. And this document sets up how you would establish a risk management process across your whole organization. And so what we did was with DOE and NERC and our industry partners and utility and electricity sector partners was come together and sort of tailor the 839 to fit the utility sector, making it more actionable, making specific inputs, outputs, there's processes, so that it would be a little simpler to understand. It's take away all that federal terminology that's in 839 and make it more user-friendly. So, and in fact, I sent the document out to a huge federal users group that I used to chair, saying, you know, you might want to look at this because it's true to 839, but it is definitely more actionable and easier to understand. So you may want to consider looking at that if you're tasked with developing your own risk management program within your organization. So this is the DOE guide, and it's out there right now for public review and comment. And as Erfan mentioned in the beginning, we also worked with DOE's NIST Corps, which is the contractor. The EPRI is the contractor. And we collaborated on that SEP 1.0, the Smart Energy Profile technical white paper. As I mentioned earlier, we have been reviewing standards, lots and lots of standards. This is just a smidgen of what we have done. We have a white paper on automating smart grid security, and that was just released, gosh, probably about a month ago. And what that's about is it's the Secure Automation Protocol. If you're familiar with SCAP, SCAP is all about taking tools, having them use the same language, XML language, same format, so that security tools can start to talk and share data together. And so this is how you could do something like that with the smart grid and common smart grid tools, security tools, and how they could adopt this SCAP protocol and this SCAP language, so that when the smart grid starts to go more automated, we can start to have this building block of utilizing this protocol so that we truly are interoperability with our tools. So it's a neat thing, and if that's something you're interested in, take a look, because that's clearly an area where I see we've got to move forward with this continuous monitoring and moving forward in that manner. The other one is that we have actually taken the CIP version 5 mapping to the NIST IR 7628. So NERC CIP version 5 came out a while ago, and what we wanted to see was how closely it mapped to the high-level security requirements in the NIST IR. What we found was that they actually do map very well. In some cases, it was apples and oranges, and where the NERC CIP went further down into the weeds, and the NIST IR was a little bit higher up there. But the kernel of each requirement, there definitely was a nice mapping. And so that was good to see that we were running, you know, kind of true to form here, that what we have in the NIST IR is consistent. And then the last thing that we've done was we mapped the NIST IR 7628 high-level security requirements to a protection profile that Germany had issued called the Smart Meter Gateway Protection Profile, just to see you know, if this was a common criteria protection profile that's going to be used in meters out in Germany, how close was it to mapping to the requirements that we had in the NIST IR? And whenever we do these mappings, this is what also feeds our update to those high-level security requirements. So we're kind of validating what we have, and if there are any gaps, then we are adding new high-level security requirements to our document. And so we found that for the most part we were pretty close to mapping, not maybe as tightly, but yes, we were pretty good. So let's go to the next one. So continuing work, the AMI security subgroup is busy writing detailed AMI security requirements. And this is something that we hope to have completed within the next couple months. I would say if this is an area you're interested in, this would be a great time to come in and review what they're doing and assist in that final leap as we're finishing this up. The security requirements are being built off of the ASEP-SG AMI security profile. And so we started with that, and then we're augmenting it. We've created use cases, and then with those use cases, the threat scenarios, and from there, the security requirements that would mitigate those threat scenario, and went through a very long process of a repeatable and mappable way to develop what these requirements would be for AMI. So I encourage you guys to take a look. The NIST IR also we're drafting. Now this next bullet is more NIST work and not necessarily, it's not really the CSWG work, though I believe more that SGIP is going to benefit from this area. So what we're doing at NIST is we're drafting a NIST IR of testing criteria for the NEMA upgradability standard. So the NEMA AMI upgradability standard that's out there now has it's a very short, probably like a 10-page standard. And so what we have done is come up with a NIST criteria on how you would test to that standard, repeatable, how you would do it. Not at the level where it would depend on what kind of meter manufacturer you have, so we have to make it one step above that, but clearly good test criteria that you can use. So the idea is to put this out there and work with, we were hoping to work with the Department of Energy on testing, actually taking that NIST IR and running actual tests on a meter upgradability system. So we're still in the process of working all of that out. And then ultimately the idea would be to develop a virtual test environment here at NIST that would contain, this test criteria, test stubs on how you would run these tests, specific test stubs, all out there in a virtual test environment that researchers, vendors, testing labs could come in and take. What we probably see is that we would hope NEMA would take this NIST IR and run with it and do more with it, and possibly use that in correlation with the IPRM that the SGIP put out, that Interoperability Process Reference Manual, and how to build test programs. And so I think NEMA is very interested in that, and this would be a nice thing to have them use, would be our NIST IR. Now this document is scheduled to come out probably around mid-April as well. The last thing is the privacy subgroup is developing recommended practices on the best ways to protect privacy when sharing them with third parties. So this is going to be an actual chapter in the updated NIST IR. So if that's an area you're interested in, I encourage you to take a look at what they're doing there. We have cyber physical is another area, cyber physical attacks. We're going to be hosting a 2-day workshop on April 23rd and 24th here at NIST in Gaithersburg, Maryland. The registration fee, it's $165 for the 2 days. It's a good deal. And in April, it'll be a nice time probably. The azaleas might even be blooming. And actually, it's so warm today, the azaleas might actually be gone by April. Who knows? Anywho, we have this cybersecurity 2-day workshop. The idea is the first day will be 5 papers that will be presented on cyber physical systems in general, so things like medical devices, buildings, cars. It would be very similar, very general cybersecurity systems and how cyber physical systems, and it's the cybersecurity of them. The last day, the second day, will be on smart grid cyber-physical systems and the security of those. So it's a 2-day event. What we want to do is take what we learn and update the high-level security requirements again, and then also develop a NIST IR on the workshop proceedings. So that's kind of our plan, and identify possibly any future work or collaborations in this area. So here's how you get involved. I mentioned the Twiki site over and over again. So the first bullet is the Twiki site. I've mentioned the various subgroups. This is where you can go to get the subgroup information. That's the second bullet. If you'd like to join the CSWG or any of the subgroups, then please send your name and which groups you'd like to join, or even if you just want to join the big, larger CSWG, that would be fine. And I host a call every other week in the morning on Monday mornings at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. The next one will be on March 26th, and that information is out there on the NIST, on that Twiki site if you go to the first one listed. And you can see, and you can listen in, because on those calls you'll hear about the various subgroups, what they're working on, announcements that I want to make. So you could definitely do it that way. Also, on the 20th of March, I'm going to be hosting a 1.5-hour meeting, and it will be you will be able to access it via a webinar on, and it'll be at 3:30 Eastern on March 20th, and that information will be out on our site as well. I don't believe it's out there yet, but it will be. If you'd like the NIST IR, you can download it from the NIST website that I mentioned earlier, or that's listed on the fourth bullet. And I think with that, I am finished.
Thank you very much, Marianne. And once again, a very detailed description of the various working groups within CSWG and the good work they're doing. I was just sitting here thinking about this being March 2012, and just 3 short years ago, this was the time when NIST was putting together the RFP for the NIST interoperability roadmap project for phase 1. And I remember how many stakeholders were very concerned that how could so many different views together under one canopy. And here we are 3 years later, like an eternity since then.
That's true.
The good work that has occurred and the documents that have populated these various websites, and the amount of consensus on many, many aspects of both the architecture as well as the applications for smart grid. So I have to commend your organization for having the patience and perseverance to keep all these quote-unquote wildcats together to get us to this point. So I thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Dr. George Arnold and the whole team there. You guys have done a wonderful job.
Good.
So I'm going to wait on the Q&A for both Jeff and Marianne's presentation until after we've heard from Shannon. So if you have questions of either Jeff or Marianne, this is a good time to post them in the Q&A window. Don't put them in the chat window. That's more for the logistics of the conference call, and occasionally I might overlook the chat window, but please start posting them in the Q&A. And I'm going to now move the speaker ball to myself so that I can bring the presentation for Shannon on. Just a moment and it'll on. Here we go. And then I'm going to move the presenter ball back to Shannon. And Shannon, do we have audio on you?
Hello?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, sure.
So,
perfect.
Yes, I just wanted to say a quick word about Shannon. She's based out of the Silicon Valley, and she works for the Department of Commerce. She will be talking about these smart grid trade missions to various countries She approached me about a couple of weeks ago and said that this is very important and she wants to get the word out to the industry. And I thought how appropriate when NIST is presenting on smart grid. So with that, Shannon, the floor is yours.
Erfan, thank you very much, and I'd like you to thank you for coordinating today's session. I think it's quite timely, and it's very insightful to hear about a lot of the NIST activities as well. So I was happy to hear the updates of those programs. What I'd like to do is take a few minutes to highlight some of the upcoming 2012 Smart Grid specific trade missions and events that we at the Department of Commerce International Trade Administration are coordinating over the next several months. Now, these events are open to U.S. companies, both smart grid companies and service providers. And I should highlight that either U.S. representatives based in the United States or U.S. representatives based in these countries are able to take part in these trade missions. We do have events scheduled for Mexico, the Czech Republic, the European Union, Russia, and the United Kingdom. And I'll give a little bit of an overview of each of these programs in the next few moments. Our first event is the U.S.-Mexico Smart Grid Conference. This is coming up fairly quickly. The date is March 29th in Mexico City. It is free to attend this event. It's a one-day, full-day event which will incorporate smart grid industry representatives from both the United States and Mexico, as well as senior Mexican Ministry of Energy and utility officials. We did get word that the representatives from Mexico's Ministry of Energy include representatives from the Office of Generation, Conduction, and Electricity Transformation, the Office of Transmission and Distribution, the Office of Electric Power Distribution, the Office of Planning and Technical Development, as well as the Office of International Affairs. And from CFE, the Mexican utility, there will be representatives from the Offices of Grid Modernization, Operations, Control Center, Generation, Transmission and Distribution, as well as the regional directors from CFE. This is a one-day event. From the United States, there will be representatives also from NIST, from the National Renewable Energy Lab, and there will be a group of representatives from ISGAN, the International Smart Grid Action Network, who will be in Mexico City at that time and will be joining the day's discussion. The application deadline is coming up fairly quickly. It's on this Wednesday, March 14th, and there's a very brief online registration form and application that are fairly simple to complete. So if you are interested in this event, please do contact me either by phone or email in the next couple of days. My contact information is at the end of this website. I should also highlight that there's the option to present your company as a portion of the technology panel presentation. This will be about a 15 or 20-minute overview highlighting U.S. smart grid technologies. There's a $300 fee to take part in this program. If you don't want to do this, again, it is free to attend this event. I'm next going to move forward to an event we have scheduled with the Czech Republic. We have a smart grid virtual trade mission that's scheduled for May 22nd, and this is going to be a half-day live webinar session. As Jeff mentioned earlier in his presentation, smart grid is an enabler of renewable energy resources, and this is one area that the Czech Republic is aiming to tackle in the coming years. They're aiming to put 13% of renewable energy resources onto their grid by 2020, and without a doubt, a lot of the U.S. smart grid technologies will be able to benefit from these programs and policies. This half-day event is going to be conducted virtually, so U.S. companies will be able to take part either from their home or office computers. The event includes a virtual briefing provided by U.S. Embassy officials on smart grid policies and develops in the Czech Republic. There will also be an overview of doing business in the Czech Republic. And our staff in Prague are also coordinating one-on-one virtual meetings with potential partners and end users in the Czech Republic. So if you would like additional information on smart grid opportunities in the Czech Republic and meeting business partners over there, please do let us know. Moving forward, our next event is the PowerGen Europe conference scheduled for May in Germany. This is the largest European power conference. And for U.S. companies that will either be attending or exhibiting at this event, we will have commercial service representatives from Munich and some of our other European posts on hand at the show. They will be doing pre-promotion of U.S. products and services to European power companies. There will be on-site export counseling and on-the-ground export resources provided throughout the duration of the conference by the commercial service Munich representatives. And the U.S. exhibitors will have access to special export and partner programs that are actually being developed right now. So if you anticipate that your company will be at PowerGen Europe, please do let us know. And if you would like additional information, we'd be glad to share this program with you. Moving forward, in June, we are scheduling a Russia Smart Grid Energy Efficiency Trade Mission. The event will take place in both Moscow and St. Petersburg. In Russia, there is a new law requiring a 40% reduction in energy intensity by 2020, and there is a new climate change policy. So we're seeing a lot more activity on the smart grid transmission distribution sector within Russia, and this poses a lot of opportunities for U.S. companies. So this week-long event will include country briefings in both Moscow and St. Petersburg on Russia's new energy policies, as well as doing business in Russia. We will be coordinating the customized, tailored business-to-business and business-to-government matchmaking meetings. And through these programs, we partner U.S. companies with potential representatives, agents, buyers, etc. This is known as our Gold Key service. We'll be offering this in both Moscow and St. Petersburg. There will be a number of networking events with leading Russian energy company representatives as well as government officials. And thanks to the generosity of the Department of Energy, there will be lodging provided for one person per firm as part of the trade mission fee, and that includes 7 days of lodging. The application deadline for this event is March 30th, and the cost for U.S. companies is $2,650 for small and medium enterprises. These are companies with less than 500 people. And for the larger firms, the cost is $3,200. Each extra representative will be charged $500. And again, to note, either U.S. company representatives based in the United States or U.S. company representatives based in Russia or in Europe are able to take part in this program. And then finally, I'd like to highlight our Smart Grid Trade Mission to the United Kingdom, which is scheduled for mid-October in London. The dates are October 15th to 17th. We found that the UK government and the private sector are encouraging smart grid technologies through a variety of policies and investment schemes. It's expected to grow from $380 million in 2010 to up to $4.5 billion in 2015. So clearly there are going to be a lot of opportunities for U.S. smart grid companies. And specifically, there's a large smart meter rollout that's expected to begin in 2014. So this trade mission will include group meetings with UK government officials and industry leaders, utility representatives, representatives from distribution network operation companies, as well as technology providers. There will be some seminars and briefings on the UK smart grid market and doing business in the United Kingdom. We're coordinating site visits for U.S. companies taking part in the program, and there will be networking opportunities and receptions as part of the trade mission. The cost is $1,200 for small and medium enterprises, again, companies with less than 500 people. And for the larger firms, the cost is $2,350, and each extra representative is $600. So if you have representatives based in the United Kingdom or in Europe, they're welcome to take part in these programs, as well as companies that are here in the United States. So that highlights the majority of our smart grid specific programs. We do have broader clean energy programs that are taking place in India and Saudi Arabia this year, but I did want to highlight these smart grid specific events. And just to give a little background for those that might be new to the commercial service, we are part of the U.S. Department of Commerce International Trade Administration, and we have 109 offices throughout the United States that work with local small and medium companies as well as some of the larger companies. And our mandate is to help U.S. companies expand their sales to overseas markets. And we do this through our international network. So we're represented in about 90 countries worldwide, wherever there is a U.S. embassy or a consulate abroad. And through this network, we develop customized and tailored business-to-business matchmaking programs, known as the Gold Key program. We conduct background checks on potential partners overseas. And we arrange for product launch and promotion events, often held at the ambassador's residence abroad. And then in general, we do commonly export counseling, market analysis, address trade, logistics, business service provider questions that arise. So with that, I'm going to conclude the session. Again, thank you very much for including this as part of today's program. And if you would like any specific information about any of these trade mission programs, feel free to contact me either by phone or by email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shannon. And before we go to the Q&A, I have a couple of announcements and some thoughts I wanted to share with all of you. First, next month, we are going to have, on the second Monday of April, a presentation from the Smart Grid Energy Research Center at UCLA, providing an overview of the various research projects that they're doing in partnership with other universities as well as with industry partners. That includes investor-owned utilities, municipals, and also working on state and federal grants. So you're going to hear a presentation from there. There is a second presentation I'm trying to finalize with the presenter, and once that's done, I'll make the announcement by email. So this would be the second Monday of April, just like the way we do it every month on the second Monday. The second thing is we do have some questions online, and we will just get to that in a moment. But I wanted to emphasize something that came out of Shannon's presentation. Basically, for companies in the United States that are paying taxes here, this is a facility that is being created by your tax dollars to promote your business overseas. If you keep in mind that the United States is only 5% of the world's population, and you think of all the fast-growing economies globally, and you start thinking about energy management in all those countries, there's a huge potential for business for all your companies globally. And this institution is facilitating that process. And in that process, you may be able to infuse new capital into the U.S. economy at a time when we really need it to help grow, so that it's not just dependent on federal funding like ARA projects and other things, but we do lift ourselves by the bootstrap. And so part of the motivation for this webinar on a monthly basis is to bring to your attention such initiatives so that you can do something about it sooner rather than later. So thank you very much, Shannon, for sharing these very important smart grid trade missions overseas, and I hope that our participants are going to take advantage of these and go out there and market their technologies and services. So now we will move to our question portion. And the first question is from Pascal Simon of Electricité de France. And he asks, could you elaborate a little bit on SCAP or SCAP? What is it?
SCAP.
Is that SCAP?
That would be SCAP, not
right,
SCAP.
Very good.
Okay. So I wanted to say the white paper is probably the best, rather than to take a lot of time, what I would suggest is going to the Twiki site, go to CSWG, and you have that information on the last of my slides. And right there in the second block, we have news. And if you scroll down to the January 18th news piece, it'll tell you where to go to download and take a look at this white paper. And so I would encourage you to go and read that, and how it's not a long one. It's only about maybe 15 pages. And it describes in depth about what SCAP is, how it could apply to the smart grid, and explains, it's a protocol. It's all about ultimately continuous monitoring and using tools to help you do that, and tools that can talk the same language. And in this case, it's an XML language. Okay.
Okay. So I've heard of FCAP, so this is a new one, Marianne.
This is SCAP, Secure Content Automation Protocol.
Okay, very good.
Oh, is there another SCAP?
Yeah.
I think there might be. You're right.
Yeah, fault configuration, accounting, and performance. And then it's called FCAPS. But F and F is the same on the telephone. So.
I'm sorry. S is in secure.
Okay, very good. Okay, the next question is from Becky Harrison of Ingenuity, who asks, where does the new Implementation Methods Committee fit in the NIST SGIP hierarchy?
Do you want me to take that one, Jeff?
Yes, would you please?
Sure. It's going to be a committee just like the Architecture Committee and the Testing and Certification Committee. So it will become another committee. So there will be 3 committees, and then the NIST, the CSWG is actually a working group. So when it becomes a committee, it means that you are voted in, the members are voted in, the chair of that committee is voted in. CSWG is a little different. You do not have to be a member of the SGIP at this stage, I should say, to participate in the CSWG. You can, but you don't have to be. So, NIST is the lead of that group, so I did not have to be voted in, and nor do members have to be voted in.
All right. Very good. Thank you. So Ron Vader asks a question, and this question we're going to be addressing on March 20th when we do our seminar at Foothill College on the role of the customer in making smart grid a reality. If you recall, when we started these webinar series, I had promised that we would start seminars regionally, and I'm starting those in the Bay Area because that's where I live initially, and then we'll go around the country and these forums. But this question from Ron Vader is directly connected to that, so I will ask that of either Marianne or Jeff. Either one of you can answer this question. Utilities are experiencing increasingly vocal and coordinated customer opposition to smart grid deployments, especially to smart meters, and are being cast in bad light as desiring to invade customer privacy, impose punitive rates for when customers want to use electricity, all at the expense of public health. Does there appear to be any role for any government agency in helping to diffuse this opposition? It feels like there are a lot of proponents for the smart grid, but only utilities seem to be left to deal with customer dissatisfaction and opposition.
This is Jeff Mazer. I'm not sure what the answer is to that. So far, I'm not aware of any government mandate that on any level that requires the adoption of smart meters. I think that the situation is similar to that faced by many new technologies. There are A, some bugs to work out, and B, a certain amount of time necessary before the public feels comfortable with it, but eventually it is seen as an advantage and the public adopts it.
I would also, this is Marianne, I'd like to also add that the administration is working, they just put out something recently on, I think it was Department of Commerce, put out a green paper, I think it was, or a white paper, there's a white paper, green paper, on best practices, or, the sort of from a privacy perspective, the kind of things you would want to think about, organizations. and privacy, sort of the golden rules. And I think, you know, it's more just out there for people to adopt if they would like. But I think we're going more and more towards that. I know Department of Energy and several other federal agencies are working together right now on studying where we are with this whole privacy approach and smart meters, and you know what's already out there, what kind of regulations are already out there, what has been done in the past, like HIPAA, and how could that even apply and be used if we needed to from a utility perspective. And so there's definitely a potential study that may be occurring in the near future on all of this.
Very good. We have one of the participants in the webinar who suggested that FCC should help diffuse the issue of RF safety.
And FCC is one of the federal agencies involved in this potential study.
Next question we have is from Isaiah Cox, who is posing a question to Shannon. I believe Shannon mentioned the U.S. Commercial Service will provide background checks on companies outside of the U.S. Is there a fee for this service?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do background checks on potential companies overseas. We can either do this anonymously, so we'll use public source information, newspapers, databases to provide the report. And alternatively, we can work with your potential partner and interview them, talk to them, maybe invite them to the embassy or consulate, go to their office and do an interview and include that as part of the background check as well. So we can either do it anonymously or in cooperation with your potential partner. The fee varies by country, but it's approximately $500 for the background check. It ranges anywhere from, say, $300 to $600, but I think as a rough guesstimate, it is about $500.
Very good. And we will continue this webinar until 40 minutes past the hour. So we have another 7 or 8 minutes so that we can ask questions of all the presenters as thoroughly as we need them to be answered. Next question is from Michael Shea, who asks, regions with the scope of the continent, namely U.S., EU, Russia, India, and China, etc., would Shannon be pleased to elaborate a little bit about smart grid-related business developments in Asia?
Yeah, that's an excellent program. So what we've seen within Asia, a lot of opportunities within China, Japan, Korea, and then India. I would have to highlight those as some of the key areas. In addition to Singapore. Singapore's been doing a lot as far as the advancement of their energy transmission distribution program. I highlight Korea in part because of their leadership on the ISGAN program, that's the International Smart Grid Action Network. And South Korea, in collaboration with Italy, has worked to develop more of an international grouping supported by the U.S. government and then the IEA in Paris to facilitate international cooperation on smart grid. Japan, through NEDO, has been doing a lot of work on the smart grid programs and had suggested some testing projects within the United States. Within Japan, the big issue is renewable energy integration. Japan is seeing a lot more opportunities in the wind and solar sectors, so they're going to need to accommodate those renewable energy resources into their grid, which is highly stable and is a very strong grid system within Japan. China, again, the State Grid Corporation of China and the Southern Grid are two very strong networks. They've instituted a series of 5-year plans to advance smart grid infrastructure within China. Right now, they're in the process of developing the transmission and distribution lines from the inner part of the country where a lot of the coal-fired power generation and the hydro resources are, and taking those lines to the coastal cities where the electricity is needed, primarily Shanghai, Beijing, et cetera. So there are clearly a lot of activities within China. And then within India, there's been a lot of discussion on the microgrid sector and doing pockets of grids within the Indian communities. Nationwide, India is also looking at advancing its broader transmission distribution network So that poses some opportunities for U.S. companies as well.
Very good. At this point, I'm not seeing any more questions. So what I'd like to do is thank all my...
Erfan, this is Jeff. Was there a question from a Greenie Van Buren that we addressed or didn't address?
Oh, initially? Oh, yes. Thank you. So that was posted very early on. Is distributed generation of renewable energy included in the 20 to 35% renewables by 2020?
Yes, this is Jeff Mazer. I can answer that. First of all, renewable energy also includes hydro. But if we're talking about distributed renewable energy, the answer is yes. That's included in the 20 to 35% renewable. Much more photovoltaics than wind. And the reason for that is that wind power, because of its nature, usually appears in the form of utility scale deployments, whereas photovoltaics, up until recently, has been primarily highly distributed, small rooftop-mounted systems, several kilowatt systems. However, we are seeing an increased number of utility-scale photovoltaic systems. So most of the distributed renewable energy systems are photovoltaics, and that is certainly included in that 20 to 35% number.
So a related question that I have, Jeff, is that with such large initiatives like million rooftop solars by 2020 in California and other initiatives in Texas and other states, why aren't the residential sector renewable energy resources counted in many cases for the quota by a certain period of time?
I was not aware that they're not. I think most distributed renewables, which essentially means distributed photovoltaics, is going in as grid-tied, battery-free grid-tied systems, and I think those are counted.
Okay, I will inquire, because I know that in the commercial and large scale like wind farms and solar farms, they definitely were, but the rooftop solar and residential in some jurisdictions was not being counted, so that's why I was asking.
I see.
Yes, so I will inquire maybe from our Public Utility Commission here in California and get a little more clarity on that.
Okay.
Wonderful. So I don't see any more questions at this time, and have gone past our regular time. So I thank you, Jeff Mazer and Marianne Swanson from NIST, and also Shannon Fraser from the Department of Commerce for wonderful presentations and answering the questions of our participants. Our next webinar is going to be on April 9th, which is the second Monday of April, and we are going to have a presentation, as I mentioned, from the UCLA SMERC program. It's the Smart Grid Energy Research Center here, and they are going to provide you an overview of the various research activities that are going on here, and we'll talk about how they're partnering with federal and state agencies, as well as with industry and other academic institutions. There will be a second presentation also, and I'm trying to finalize the speaker for that. Also, going forward, if there are presentations that any of you would like to make in future webinars, please write to me with an email with the title of your presentation, and I will try to schedule it. Typically, we provide 30 minutes for presentation and maybe 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. And I'm trying to limit it to between 2 and 3 presentations each month. So with that, Marianne, Jeff, and Shannon, any final comments or?
Nope. Thank you again for being willing to host. We appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you, Erfan.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. It was very insightful.
Okay, very good. So at this point, I'm going to pause the recording, and feel free to log off, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for participating today.
Thank you.
you.